Okay, so we're going to finish notes. This week, this will be the last bit of notes. We'll start reviewing and testing towards the end of the week. So this is just a chart that I actually have kids fill out in class, but you'll just have to hear about it in here. Probably answer a question over it. So it says the frequency of serial killers gender by decade. So if you look, women are in the green, men are in the red. Now, that's something that I think most of us would probably know that there are a lot more male serial killers than there are women. But honestly, if you go back to the 1900s, 1910, 1920, like back then, our records of serial killers actually was kind of matched for women and men. Like it wasn't that much higher. And then right around here, 1950s, is when we had this huge spike for male serial killers. It went down 1990. And then a little bit back up in 2000, and now it's been tapering off and has been staying fairly low as of recently. Now, we gotta just kind of debate in class, why did these numbers go up? And there could be so many reasons, but it's kind of just something to ponder. Like, what do you think happened here? Why do you think it went down? Now, the only reason, I have one thing, because there could be a lot. Could be a whole lot of things that could have happened. But for me, there's one that I can think of that would make it go up and go back down. So I know that right around here, 1950s, is when we started getting a lot better at catching criminals. That's just true. Our science from the history we went over, we could figure out toxins that were used to kill people, with poisons, better with ballistics. We were better with just tracking in general, psychology of profiling, just all around better in all areas of forensic science. So a part of me kind of wonders if really these numbers were actually way higher. We just had no idea because we couldn't catch them. And then right around here is when we started catching them all. So now they're high just because we could catch them, and that women were just kind of always low, that we were just unlikely to be serial killers if you were a woman. And then why it was going down is kind of the same thing. So if we have all this ability to catch them, perhaps they start realizing, so anyone who had the disposition to be a serial killer starts realizing that they're probably not going to get away with it these days, so then they don't do it. That fear of having to spend their life in prison actually stops them from doing it. Here, they did it all the time, we just didn't know. Here, they didn't realize to get caught, so they were doing it just like these people were. And then after it kind of sinks in, they're like, wow, people are just getting caught. There's just not really a good way to murder and not be caught, especially to be a serial killer. So they stop doing it. Now, that could be totally wrong. Again, that is my guess, but that's what we tend to debate, and kids will come up with good ideas. So let's see if you can come up with any of your own. Okay, so now we're moving into the law part. So there are different types of criminal cases that receive different levels of forensic treatment. So I would love to say that every single case just has all the forensics going in to catch the bad guys. But in reality, forensics are used more in crimes against persons rather than property. So if you just have a simple case of robbery, they probably do not have a lot of they just don't have a lot of people. There's not a lot of people that are available in law enforcement, that are available in forensic science, that can go and spend a lot of time on a case for a robbery. So mostly they're going to be focusing on cases that hurt an individual person. So, that makes sense, but it just means that, we just don't have enough people. So we are focusing on, crimes that hurt a person. There are also differences in the importance of physical evidence analysis, two different types of cases. So there are certain types of physical evidence that we would look for in different types of crimes. So in drug possession, obviously the drugs must be identified. So we'd have forensic scientists doing a simple drug test. Whereas in other cases, they broke in and shot someone, well, then we'd have to have people who were good at tool mark evidence. How did they break in? What did they use? And you can tell from looking at the weapon analysis how they got in the house. So how we decide what to train people in is what we generally would need people for. So we actually have a higher need for a toxicologist because there's quite a few drug cases, and a lower need for something like psychology. Now, most of this I don't test you over the different types of, how do I keep getting out of my thing? the different types of law. Because I don't test you on these because it's not forensic. So basically just kind of looking over, these are not the law types that forensics focuses on. So law on the books, common law made up of judicial opinions, precedents, and then civil law is like for private cases. So property, divorces, wills, fines. None of that is something that forensics is really interested in or be a part of in court usually. So what forensics cases usually are in is criminal law. So criminal law is often referred to as public law. It deals with regulation, enforcement of rights. So when you do something that goes against someone else's rights, that is criminal law. And that is usually meaning you're hurting someone in some way. So forensics is going to be stepping in that kind of law case and that kind of court case. So there are the two types, misdemeanors and felonies. Okay, so misdemeanors are minor crimes such as theft, minor assault and battery, or possession of small amount of illegal drugs. A felony is a major crime, such as murder, rape, armed robbery, serious assault, so dealing of illegal drugs. So not just having it, but selling it. Fraud, auto theft is a bigger theft, is stealing a car, because people need their cars. And forgery, usually forgery meaning taking large amounts of money through fraud. So in criminal cases, though, the prosecution must prove guilt beyond reasonable doubt to convict a suspect. So that is the job of a forensic scientist, is to make so much evidence available that they have no doubt and want to convict that person. If you can't find enough evidence where you would have no doubt, then that person shouldn't be convicted, because that's how the law should work. Now, here's just some examples of misdemeanor crimes. So a first degree is always going to be worse, and then minor is going to be like the least amount. So most of these, if you're noticing, are fines. So they're not even really getting prison time sometimes, or if their prison sentences are days. So 180 days is the worst that you're going to get for a misdemeanor. 90 days, 60s, 30, no jail. So you're going to get a fine and a small amount of jail time for a misdemeanor. So a misdemeanor could be making or causing a false report on child abuse. Petty theft, like that's smaller theft. Carrying a gun without a permit. Abuse of a corpse, which, ew. But I guess it's still a misdemeanor. Obstructing official business. Unlawful transaction of weapons, or selling a weapon that you didn't make sure they registered. Disturbing a lawful meeting. Failure to disperse, so a cop tells you to leave and you do not. Disorderly conduct. Disorderly conduct is like anything cop tells you to do and you don't do it. Failure to aid a law enforcement officer, so he asks for help and you don't do it. Public gaming means shooting animals that are not in season. So that's just some examples of things that are misdemeanors. Now, here are some things that are felonies. So a felony, the unclassified felonies, would be the highest. Then you have first degree. These are just types of murder, like first degree murder. If you've heard first degree, second degree, third degree murder, that's what they are. And then you can have first degree other things as well. So unclassified felonies, 15 years in prison to life. So you're the least amount of time you're getting is 15 years. 3 to 11, 2 to 8, 9 to 5. So, and then bigger fines are possible as well. So murder, aggravated just means more aggressive. And then rape would be first degree. This is one of the ones that we talk about off and on throughout the year, just how I don't see why it has such a lower sentence rate. And then there are sometimes it says 3 to 11. It says 3 to 11 right there, and yet somehow they plea bargain out and get less, because you can plea bargain and get a lighter sentence. Voluntary manslaughter, so that's like accidentally hitting someone with your car. Kidnapping. Abduction, which is kind of the same. I guess it depends on how they kidnap. Reckless homicide, robbery, so that'd be a bigger robbery though. Reckless homicide is like you didn't mean to, but they're dead. Unlawful sexual conduct with a minor, terrible. That should be higher sentence. Safe cracking is like you got into someone's safe, what it sounds like. And then stealing a car, illegal gambling. So these are things that are considered felonies. There are more, but that's just kind of giving you examples to think about when you're thinking about felonies versus misdemeanors. So steps to pursuing justice. This is basically the steps in any case. A crime is committed, the crime is discovered, the police investigate. Now, after they're investigating, we have to collect the evidence, and that's when forensics comes in, when the investigating part. All information is assembled into reports that after you've investigated, you have to write a report, and it hopefully is good, and you're going to go to court and hopefully catch the person who did it. Investigation ensues, so you bring that report to them, you're going to court now, and if there is enough evidence to establish probable cause, an arrest warrant is issued. So we're going to spend more time on probable cause later, so I'm not going to talk about it a lot here, but it will probably pop up on just a quick question. You are not allowed to take anything. So a cop is not allowed to take anything, either a forensic scientist as well. So like evidence that we are collecting, you have to be allowed to collect it. If you are not, if it is an illegal seizure of evidence, then it most definitely can be thrown out in court. So this is important to make sure that you have the warrant, you have the access to these crime cases. So a reasonable suspicion means you have enough suspicion to like stop and frisk a person. And if you find something on that person, then you can't take it. A probable cause is for a warrantless search or arrest. It says in the United States criminal court system, probable cause refers to facts or evidence that would make a reasonable person believe that a crime or wrongdoing has been, is being, or will be committed. Now, if you can't tell, it's pretty vague. That's why a lot of times like you have to prove, did they have probable cause? And then it's kind of up to the judge to decide if they did or they didn't, if that evidence was taken legally or not. So if you do not have a warrant, but let's say you get to the house of the suspect that you were already going to question and you hear a gunshot go off. Okay, that should be a reasonable person believing that a wrongdoing is being occurred. They hear a gunshot. So they bust into the scene and they catch the suspect with the gun in his hand. Okay, so like all of that should be like, they should be able to arrest him. They should be able to take the gun. Anything else they see out in the room that might be possibly as part of evidence. And then that would be a pretty good probable cause. But I mean, you have to make sure that you have a really good probable cause, because if it gets thrown out, then you can't use the evidence. This is just how kind of like the court process goes. You have your preliminary eventually hearing, you have your grand jury trial, you have plea bargaining. So this is just mostly what I want to point out in this part is that most cases don't go to trial. More than 90% of convictions come from negotiated pleas, meaning they're plea bargaining. So they never make it to court, which means less than 10% of criminal cases end up actually going to trial. So that means that if you do a good enough job making your report, you have so much evidence against them. A lot of times the lawyer will tell the person like, hey, it would be a better idea for you to plea bargain. Now, plea bargain usually means you're going to get a lighter sentence, but you are going to get a sentence. You're going to be called guilty. You're going to plead guilty. You're going to get a sentence, but it's going to be a lesser charge than what they'll fight for if you go to court. If you go to court, they're going to fight for the highest type of charge. So it's kind of like you have to decide, are you willing to go and fight for it and possibly lose and get a much heavier sentence? Or are you going to plea bargain, plead guilty? Maybe you didn't even do it, but if they have all the evidence stacks up against you, you're like, it might be a better deal to take the 1 to 2 year than to go in there and get 10. So a lot of cases end up plea bargaining. I'm just kind of showing you the process of court. So you're going through, getting arrested, deciding what you're going to do. And you'll have these charts in your notes to look at. So we're going to continue doing more about a few of the law practices, about how sentencing kind of goes in activities in class. But that is it with the actual notes.